Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can deal with fringing around trees and other elements in your photos when you're replacing skies. Before we get started with this tutorial, let's have a look and see the problem that we're trying to solve here. This is an image that was sent to me by a reader from my blog, and what they wanted to do was to replace the sky in the original image. So let's just have a look and see what they had. This was their original image and it had very pale sky. Now they tried to do it using blend if and also to remove the sky and replace it. The problem is that the results really aren't up to scratch because there's a lot of fringing around the trees here. And so they wrote and asked what they could do about that, and this is my solution here, and this is the solution I'm going to show you how to achieve, because here we've got the trees a lot more blended into the sky and the result is a little bit better. So I'm going to show you how you can get to this solution and avoid the problems with the fringing around the trees as you're seeing here. Now to see this process at work, I've made a duplicate of the original image that I was sent. So I've got the sky on a layer and this is the original image. As always, the first thing I'm going to do is make a duplicate of the background layer, the main image layer, so that I can work on it. Now, one of the things I was a little concerned about in the fix that I saw was that there's a lot of this black area, or really dark area of the sky coming through the trees. So the first thing that I did was to actually deal with this sky layer a little bit better. So I'm just going to grab the Move tool here. I'm going to Control T, Control 0 so I can see exactly what I'm working with. You can see that we have quite a bit of sky image that we can work with, and I think it was just a bit on the dark side, so I'm going to make it a little bit less dark, and I'm going to also stretch it out a little bit. Now I want to keep pretty much to the original proportions of the sky. I don't want to stretch it out too much because it really is quite an interesting sky, but I do think I need a slightly lighter grey area behind the trees. So let's just select that and call that good. So I'm just going to zoom the image a bit better so that we can now get to work on it. And I'm going to put this sky layer behind the image layer because we really want to be seeing the image. Now the way that I solved this problem was to go to the magic wand tool. Now this is not a tool that I generally recommend, and it's often called the tragic wand tool because it really isn't the world's most sophisticated tool. But for this image, it does a really good job. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that contiguous is not selected. If contiguous was selected, then when I select an area here, I'm only going to get the white or blue sort of color here that is all in adjacent and connected pixels, but I don't want it because I want to pick up little bits here and here and here, so contiguous needs to be turned off. Anti-alias will also try to feather the edges a little bit for me, so that's pretty good. I have a 3x3 average sample size. That just means that we're going to sample 3x3 block of pixels rather than just the single pixel under the cursor, because it's really impossible to see what we're clicking on here. And I'm going to adjust my tolerance. Now I started with 25 when I did it, but I'm thinking this second time round I might experiment with 30, just a bit higher tolerance. This means that when I click on the image now, I'm going to select the area under the cursor and everything else that is in that range of colored pixels. So you can see that I'm picking up pixels through the trees here as well as the sky. And that's pretty good. I think that's a pretty good start. So now I'm going to mask this by clicking on the Add Layer Mask icon. And that has given me a mask totally the wrong way around, but I'm just going to click on the mask to select it and press Ctrl I to invert it. So far we've got the sky coming through the trees, and the sky is probably a better one than we had in the first place. Let's just switch to what was sent to me, and you can see that the sky was probably a bit overly dark and certainly too dark through the trees here for the image that we were working with. But here we've got some lighter pixels in it, so part of the solution is looking better. It's just that the fringing has not gone away, so we need to deal now with this fringing problem. And the solution to the fringing problem is really dictated by what fringing is. If we have a look in here at the fringing issue, it's because the pixels around the very edge of these leaves are very light because it was taken against a very light sky. So the solution is to darken these edges. And if we can darken the edges, we'll get rid of the fringing. So we're going to use the selection that we have of the sky in this mask here as a way of extracting these edges to darken them up. So I'm going to click on the layer mask thumbnail. In actual fact, control click on it to select the area that we have selected there. Let's go back to the image, and I'm just going to press delete so you can see what was selected. What is selected is all the white area, so that's everything that was in this image. So let's just undo that. Now that we've got it selected, what I want to do is to bring the selection in just a little bit. So I'm going to contract it. I'll choose select and then modify and then contract, because I'm going to bring the selection in around 20 pixels. Now that has made these pixels on the outside, so they're outside the selection again. Let's just press the delete key so we can see what we're working with. What I've done is basically isolated the problem areas to an area all by themselves so I can do something with them. It's just that they're not selected right now. Let's press Ctrl Z to undo that, and I want to soften this edge as well. But first of all, I'm going to invert it. So I'm going to choose Select, Inverse. So now what is selected is all the problem area, and what's unselected is the bit that I don't want to affect. Let's go back to that. And now I just want to feather it a little bit, so I'm going to choose Select and then Modify, and I'll just use Feather here, and I'll feather it probably around 10 pixels just to soften those edges. So now let's see what we've got. When I press Delete, these are the areas that are not selected. Everything else is selected, so all the problem areas right now are selected. I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo that. So now that we've got a selection that covers the area that we're having problems with, the solution is to darken that area, and we can do that with the Burn tool here. The Burn tool shares a toolbar position with Dodge and Sponge, but it's Burn that we want because that's a darkening effect. And it uses a brush, so what you want to do is go and get a nice soft edge brush. So I'm going to select this brush, which actually has a hard edge. I'm just going to soften its edge, probably to around 25%. Okay, and it's way too small right now, so I'm just going to increase its size by pressing the square bracket, but of course I could adjust its size by adjusting the size here on the slider. I want to affect the highlights, so I can affect with the Burn tool highlights, midtones or shadows, but it's the highlight areas of this image that are the problem, so I'm going to choose to affect highlights. And then I can adjust exposure. Now exposure ramps up pretty quickly, so you'll actually probably only want it to be around 20%, or you're going to attack this image way too fast. And because the area that I want to affect is the area selected, I'm just going to paint over it. Now if I press Control or Command H, I can actually hide these selections so that we can't see the selection. All we can see is the problem, and that's even better because now I can just paint over the fringed areas. And because they're already selected, and because I've got this all nicely protected, the only area that I can paint over is actually the area that is the highlighted area that has the fringing problem. So if I go over an area that was not a problem, the paint or the burning effect is not even affecting that. So now I'm going to ramp up exposure a little bit more just to get through this. You would do it more slowly by building up the effect, but I just want to give you something to look at. So okay, I've ramped it up way higher than you would, and so I'm going to burn some of these leaves a bit too much, but it would be better if you took this at a slower pace than the pace that I'm attacking it at. But I just want to show you the results. What we're doing here is we've isolated the edges that were fringed and that are really causing problems against our now darker sky, and I'm painting over those to burn them in, to darken the edges, and when the edges are darkened, the sky is going to blend in a lot more and we're not going to see this fringing effect. Now the burn tool operates by addition, so the more you paint, lift the paintbrush off the surface and then paint again, you're building up the effect. And as I said, I've got a horrifyingly large value here, so I'm really damaging the sky more than I needed to, but you'll take a better approach at that when you do it yourself. So let's just zoom out and see what we've got. Now we don't have the fringing around the edges. The fringing has been removed. I'm going to go to the history and we'll just wind back history to before we started to attack this image with the burn tool and see the difference. This is the before and this is the after, and the sky has blended into this image a whole lot better than it had. So there's a fairly easy way to get rid of a fringing effect. First of all, replace your sky and then make a selection around the fringed areas and just burn in the edges so that the sky blends in with the trees and that you don't get this sort of fringing around the trees. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more tutorials on this YouTube channel. And visit my website at projectwoman.com for more tips, tricks and tutorials on Photoshop, Photoshop Elements, Paint Shop Pro, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.